Hi, and welcome back to Programming with Pax. In today's video, we are going to take a look at closures in JavaScript. We'll start by talking about what closures are and why they're important, and after that, we're going to take a look at a couple different examples and break them down and make better sense of them. Let's get started. So, what is a closure? It is a combination of a function and its lexical environment, meaning the surrounding code. A closure gives you access to an outer function scope from an inner function. All right, and here is an example of a closure in its simplest form. So we have an outer function. Within it, we have a variable named greet, and also an inner function, which console logs this greeting variable. Outer function calls the inner function, and just outside of it, we're also calling the outer function. So I'm going to refresh my console, which will run this code, and let's see what happens. And as you can see, the greetings variable, hi, is printed to the console. So how does this work? What sorcery is going on that allows this function to have access to a variable outside of its scope? Well, this is where closures come in. When the inner function gets called, JavaScript creates a box that closes around the function and its surrounding values. It is put into something called the memory heap. Think of the memory heap as the JavaScript engine's long-term memory. With both the function and its surrounding code put into the memory heap, when the greeting is console logged, JavaScript looks within the scope of the inner function and asks, do I have a variable named greeting inside this function? No, it doesn't see a variable named greeting, and so it goes up the scope chain into the surrounding code and then asks again, do I have a variable named greeting here? And yes, it does. We can see the closure in action by going to the Sources tab, and I'm just going to make this a little bigger. And if I put a breakpoint where the console log is, and I'm going to refresh again, which runs the code, within the scope, we can see that we have a closure here with a variable named greeting. And so that closure is that box that I mentioned before. All right, so let's look at another example. So we have a count variable, and then we have a function called increaseCount. And within the increaseCount function, it returns another function. This function increases the count by 1. So the ++ is just a shorthand for increase the count by 1. And then we're going to return the count. So again, we have a function with another function inside. So if we want to increase the count and get that value, all we have to do is console log the increased count function and invoke it as well. If I save, we can see we have 1 right here because the count goes from 0 to 1. And if I want to continue to increase it, I can just duplicate these lines and save. And now we have 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to make an optimization here and utilize closures. The problem with having count on the outside here is that even though count is only used within the increaseCount function, other code that is in the same file can interact with this count variable. So what we can do is put the count inside of increaseCount. By doing this, we can protect the count variable. If I save now, we have the same values, 1, 2, and 3. You may be wondering, why can't we just put the count even deeper inside? Well, if we do that and check the console, we can see that we have 1, 1, 1 now. The reason for this is that every time we return this function, we're recreating the count variable. So it prints 1, the function then gets called again, which wipes the count variable, and then prints 1 again. So the state is not saved. So let's put the count variable back where it originally was and save, and we can see we have 1, 2, 3 again. So just like the original example that I showed, this inner function references and uses this count variable, but that variable isn't defined within this function. And so a closure is created around it. So this leads us to why are closures important? First, they control what is and isn't in scope for a certain function. Without closures, functions would only have access to the variables defined within them, or that are passed to them through function arguments. Another reason that they're important is for something called data encapsulation, where variables in the outer function scope are considered private so that they cannot be accidentally changed from code outside of the increase count function. Finally, it also allows us to save a variable's values, as we saw with count when it was placed within increase count. All right, so that covers closures in JavaScript. If you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comment section down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you did find this video helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like, as it really helps this channel out. And if you're feeling extra adventurous, maybe even subscribe. This video is part of a JavaScript fundamentals series that I'm working on, which are all of these topics that can sometimes be a little bit trickier to understand, but you definitely need to know them. So I will leave a link to the playlist in the description down below. As always, thank you very much for your time. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you in the next one.